Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we're once again talking about James Harden, Houston Rockets, Russell Westbrook, John Wall. I made a video last night talking about the trade specifically, but I feel like it's worth talking about again, revisiting this idea of a James Harden trade and the impact of this specific deal, the Russell Westbrook for John Wall swap, on the likelihood that we will have a James Harden trade at some point within the next few weeks. Because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions, there's a lot of ideas being floated around on social media that, quite frankly, I just don't think are correct. And I want to kind of give my thoughts on them in today's video. But quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day, all throughout the NBA offseason, as I have this entire time. So if you're looking for a place for consistent NBA content and a channel that's close to 100,000 subscribers, this is a great place to be. You can also leave a like rating on the video as well. Helps me out a ton, lets me know that you're enjoying the content, and helps it get out to more people on YouTube as well. And you can hang out with me at various socials at the bottom of the screen to hang out with me outside of these videos. But with those things said, let's go ahead and talk about the possibility of a James Harden trade. So prior to this Russell Westbrook deal, we hadn't seen a lot of movement. It was like a 3 or 4 day span where we went from Westbrook wants to be traded to Harden wants out to Harden wants to go to Brooklyn to maybe a trade was imminent to Philly is involved because of the Daryl Morey connection. And it was all this information all at once. And then things kind of calmed down. And it's been, I would say, like 2 weeks since that point. And we knew that this Russell Westbrook, John Wall thing had been talked about, but it hadn't actually gone through. And then yesterday it finally did. And I talked about in that video yesterday, as well as on Twitter, the fact that I thought that was the biggest indicator that we gotten to this point, that the Rockets are going to trade James Harden at some point this season or within the next couple of weeks prior to training camp. I thought that it was very clear the message that was being sent there by Houston was that they're preparing for a world in a post James Harden trade. And I got some pushback on that because people were saying, well, this really isn't a downgrade from Westbrook to Wall. Westbrook didn't want to be there. You're getting the pick anyway. Maybe this will help James Harden want to stay. First of all, the comparison between what Russell Westbrook is now, which I know some people aren't big fans of Westbrook. I'm not a big Westbrook guy. But the comparison of who Russell Westbrook is right now compared to John Wall, who has not played in 2 full seasons, and even before he got hurt and was fully healthy, yes, he made an All-NBA team once, but he was also an inefficient guard that couldn't shoot. So it's not like we're talking about, them trading for prime Steph Curry or anything that hadn't played in 2 years. Like, this is clearly a downgrade. Even if John Wall is like 90% of what he used to be, it's still a downgrade. Russell Westbrook is still a really good player. Even if you don't love what he does on the floor all the time, even if you don't think that he helps your team win a ton of basketball games, he is still a very, very good and a very talented player and should make a really dynamic backcourt combination there in Washington. So if you're going off that mindset, which I think is the case, I think that John Wall is a significant downgrade from Russell Westbrook, and that's why there's a first-round pick involved in the deal. Clearly, both teams think that it's a downgrade, okay? If you follow that path and you also think, okay, well, why would it make sense for Houston to downgrade their roster in a season in which they are supposedly, reportedly, still looking to be, quote unquote, competitive with James Harden on the roster? Well, one answer, of course, is that Westbrook didn't want to be there in the first place, and your trade options are limited considering his salary, and Wall is one of the few players that you could trade for in exchange for Russell Westbrook. And then the other part of that, of course, is the fact that they're getting the first round pick, and they're looking to build towards something that doesn't involve James Harden in Houston. And when I said that in the video yesterday, and I said it on Twitter, there was some pushback again because there were reports coming out afterwards that the Rockets are committed to building around James Harden. Trading away Russell Westbrook doesn't mean that they're going to move on from Harden. They want to compete. They want to convince him to stay. Here's my problem with that. One, we have multiple accounts at this point of the fact that James Harden does not want to be a Houston Rocket anymore. He turned down the largest extension offer in league history, 2 years, $90 million or something. And he told them he doesn't want to be there anymore. And that has been it was a private trade request, like through his agent or whatever, but it's been publicly reported that James Harden doesn't want to be a Houston Rocket anymore. And as we've talked about in previous videos, typically when players request a trade, they end up getting traded, okay? So there's one part of it. The other part of it is, let's really think about this specific report that we're talking about right here. This is the one that everybody cited as, oh, look, the Rockets want to keep him. The Rockets want to keep him. They're just changing up the roster. They're getting rid of Westbrook because he doesn't want to be there anymore. Okay. How do we know about this report, right? It more than likely came from the Rockets themselves, right? Okay. What benefit does it provide to the Houston Rockets to come out and say, James Harden is going to be traded in the next couple weeks, get your offers in? There is no benefit in this specific scenario because everybody else already knows that he wants to leave and that he is available. It's not a situation where like teams don't know that a guy's available. They want to kind of get some feelers out there to let them know so they can start competing. Every team already has put together their best James Harden package and sent it to Houston. So there's no point in them saying he's available so that then they lose their leverage, because these teams are actively trying to convince Houston to trade James Harden. So they're not just going to come out and say, oh, we're ready to trade him. So they're going to come out and say exactly what they did in this report yesterday because it benefits them. It adds leverage to the situation. It makes other teams think, or at least puts out enough of a smokescreen to make them think that they want to keep James Harden. You have to convince them. You have to give them an offer they can't refuse in exchange for James Harden, rather than just, hey, everybody give us your trade offers and we'll move him at some point, right? So when you're citing like specific reports that have come out, whether it be on Twitter or otherwise, it's tough because a lot of times I'll just look at them and I'll be like, okay, this is true, this is what's happening, let's talk about it. But specifically with trade stuff and with a player that has requested a trade and the team has been reluctant to trade at this point, you have to read between the lines a little bit and not just assume that what is being said here in this report is 100% accurate. Not that that's not what's being told to the reporter, but that is just simply not the case for Houston. Think about leading up to any draft scenario, whether it's NFL draft, NBA draft, we hear constant rumors about any team up and down the draft. Remember when the Warriors were interested in Denny at number 2 overall, and then he went number 9, right? The Warriors loved every pick at number 2. We didn't know who was going to go number 1 until like an hour before the draft. There's just all these little smoke screens constantly, and the media is a tool for these front offices. It is. It's not like let's make sure the fans are really informed about what our front office is doing. It is a tool 90% of the time. Yes, sometimes there are leaks. Sometimes there are players that speak out on things that the team doesn't want them to speak out on, and they say them privately to a reporter, and then there are leaks that way. But 90% of the time, when it comes to front office rumors, like this is what the team does or does not want to do, it is being used as a tool to A, communicate with other teams around the league in a correct manner, or B, use it as a smokescreen to confuse and or push different teams in a different direction. And I think that's exactly what we're looking at here with this James Harden report. So the conclusion that I've come to is that at some point they're going to trade James Harden. Like, I don't see a scenario in which they start next season and you know, John Wall looks incredible and James Harden is happy playing with John Wall and Christian Wood and DeMarcus Cousins, and all of a sudden, you know, they're 19-3 a handful of weeks into the season and everybody's happy. I don't foresee that happening. It's a tough Western Conference. I wouldn't be surprised if they start the season like 10-9. It makes things worse, and then all of a sudden Houston has to make a deal because Harden just simply doesn't even want to be on the floor anymore, if he even takes the floor in the first place, which I've talked about in entirely separate videos. My last point here is maybe the most irritating one. There were people yesterday that were saying, no, they're not going to trade James Harden because they wouldn't have signed DeMarcus Cousins if their plan was to trade James Harden. DeMarcus Cousins might as well be a 10-day contract player at this point. And it's unfortunate because he's incredibly talented and the injury stuff really, really sucks. But let's not cite the signing of a minimum contract player in DeMarcus Cousins as the indication that James Harden is not going to be moved. In my opinion, if you read between the lines, if you think about what the report does or doesn't mean, if you think about what it does or doesn't mean that Westbrook is now gone, that Westbrook doesn't want to be there anymore after James Harden advocated for Westbrook to be there, I think it's pretty clear that conversations were had there where pretty much everybody realized Houston isn't the place to be. This guy wants to leave. This guy wants to leave. It's a sinking ship. I want to get out of here. And I don't see how that has suddenly changed now for James Harden. And you can say what you want about the trade specifically. I think it's a win for Washington in a pretty significant way, especially given the protections on this pick where, you know, I think it's like lottery protected in 2023. Whatever happens with this team moving forward, worst case, they might give up like the 10th or 11th pick in the draft in like 2024, which, yeah, would kind of suck. But in the short term, you're getting, in my opinion, a significant upgrade. I think there's a direct correlation between how long it's been since we've watched John Wall play basketball and the relative opinion of people on how good John Wall is at basketball. It's been a long time since we've seen him on the court, and I think some people are forgetting some of the bad John Wall stuff, and they're remembering like 2016-17 All-NBA caliber John Wall was a very good player, but a guy that hasn't played in 2 years now, coming off of one of the most devastating injuries a player can have, and the last time that we saw him pre-injury, he didn't look good. So I don't know why all of a sudden we're assuming now that this is an upgrade for the Houston roster and they're looking to move forward with Christian Wood, James Harden, John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, and PJ Tucker. I simply don't think that's what's going on. I think they downgraded their roster because a player wanted out because they got extra assets. They're going to rehab John Wall in a way that's going to allow them to get assets out of him in the future. James Harden will be traded within a month or so, and that's going to be the end of the Houston Harden situation. And I'm not just saying that for the content. Like, I really do think that's what's going to happen. I'm not just saying that because I want it to happen. I honestly do believe Harden's going to get traded relatively soon. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.